Hello everyone, it's Rob here. Listen, it's YouTube. You know what to do. Hit the bell and the thumbs up, right? Okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye. Okay, here we go, folks. Let's talk to Niki Ashton, okay? Let's see. Hopefully this works.
Hello, Rob?
Hello, Niki, are you there?
I am good. Yes, I am good and I am here.
Okay, I don't see your video. Is your video not turned on?
Yeah, I'm just gonna turn it on. I'm just
Oh, okay. Just checking.
doing my headphones here.
Okay. Cool.
And actually, I'm just gonna grab a quick glass of water.
Please do.
Okay.
Go ahead. You got to be hydrated. Very important. We got to hydrate, folks. It's very important. So she'll be back in one moment, I guess. This seems to be working properly, though. All my work that I've done in my technological setup seems to have paid off. Good point to fire off a tweet. I just retweeted my tweet about this earlier. Hopefully that'll be enough.
Okay. Let me see if I can get my headphones in.
Oh boy. Sounds like a full house over there.
Oh, yeah. It always is these days.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Let me just increase the volume. Okay, we're just trying to get my kids to move to another part of the house.
I understand. I understand the difficulty. I've been there.
The struggle.
Yes.
How's it's a son, right? You have a
Yeah,
son?
my son's 5 years old. He's just in daycare. He's in daycare right now. If he was not in daycare, I would not be able to do this stream because he would be climbing all over me and trying to beat me up and saying all kinds of stuff into the microphone, and it would just be a total disaster. So
Yeah, like I mean, it really, it's and they're well, I don't know 5, but I know 3 and a bit, and we're like.
Well, but you got more than one though. That's the tricky thing there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is super tricky. Like they're playing with each other more, but they're also like infinitely more vocal, which I love. Like that's my people. But and I want to instill that in my kids, but that vocalness is often directed at me, and
yes.
Yeah, so it is what it is. Okay, so I'm actually just trying to log into the house concurrently, not because I'm going to be in there, but we do have votes right after, so I just want to make sure I'm in so that we're not.
No problem. Yeah. We were just having a bit of chip discourse. Do you have like a chip preference before we get into any serious stuff? When you sit down to relax, you want to open a bag of chips. What's your go-to?
At this stage in my life, anything that's in the house.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I was a lifelong ketchup chip lover, but
Okay.
I will literally eat anything because by that point it's just been so exhausting, and chips are my go-to. Like people are like peanuts are better, but I usually have some peanuts and they'll go straight to the chips.
Yeah, it doesn't really replace the satisfying chip
You're just like, why am I wasting time on this? How about you? What's your favorite?
I'm a big fan of those, the Miss Vicky lime and black pepper. I don't know if that's like a coastal elite liberal thing, but that's probably my preference. I quite enjoy those.
They do sell Miss Vicky's in Thompson, Manitoba. So you're not elite, and I have tasted that one. I will say it's not my I love her. I think it's the barbecue. Is it mesquite? Is it the mesquite?
Something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that one, if that's around, I'm all for it. So, but like I said,
yeah,
I'll take anything.
Okay. Well, we can agree to disagree on this. That's fine. Have a little struggle session about the chip flavors.
Yeah, chips. Yeah, what does your chip bag say about your politics? So, anyway, no, I'm good to go, Rob.
Okay. Are you going to use your camera, or because right now I have you as just a black screen?
Sorry. I just yeah. Sorry. By good to go, I mean.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Okay.
Can you see me? Yeah?
Yes, I can. Okay. Hello, and welcome. Chad, everyone say hello to Niki Ashton. Thank you very much for doing this. It's really great to talk to you about this stuff.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, very cool. So this is your first Twitch stream, isn't it? Your team seemed kind of not intimidated, but it seemed kind of, they were like, oh no, we don't know how any of this stuff works.
Yeah, no, this is my first Twitch stream, and while I've seen Twitch play out, we've never done it, and I hope one time to just have more time to actually have the full Twitch experience, but unfortunately right now we got a Zoom, and but nevertheless I'm super jazzed to connect with you and folks tuned in and folks that will listen later as well, and talk about our exciting event coming up.
Yeah, so let's talk about this event. We've been going over some of the other material from Progressive International earlier on in the stream, but this event you're doing is with Jeremy Corbyn, Building Solidarity, a conversation with Jeremy Corbyn and Niki Ashton. It's next Saturday, March 20th. I'm going to put a link in the chat here for anyone that wants to attend this event. But why don't you just talk about what this is all about and how you got involved with this event with Jeremy Corbyn?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Progressive International is a relatively new network. And I think actually you and I talked about this, Rob, in our last interview, right? So it launched in December of 2018 in Vermont. The host was Bernie Sanders and the Sanders Institute. I was invited to take part and be part of the launch. And I have to say, I'll never forget that gathering. It was incredibly inspiring. I know we were tweeting and sending messages out at the time, so some folks that followed our work then may remember. I got to be on a panel with Bernie himself, with Yanis Varoufakis, other really inspiring folks who are part of the event, like Naomi Klein, Cornel West, from around the world, like Fernando Haddad from Brazil, Ada Colau from Spain. And it was a real cross-section of progressive, left-wing activists, advocates, artists, and people that share share the belief that we need a transformative vision for our future, one that seeks to achieve social, environmental, and economic justice for all. And so we launched Progressive International at that time. As many people know, Bernie then went on to run for president. So the Sanders Institute went on pause, and therefore so did some of the work of Progressive International. Things came back, then COVID hit, and but nevertheless, things have picked up, certainly in the virtual sense. And it's been an exciting few months for Progressive International recently. Folks may have seen the Make Amazon Pay campaign in December, where that was Progressive International that put it together, along with Amazon workers from the warehouses, trade unions, politicians, activists, and the goal of that was to create a global call to make Amazon pay. Progressive International is also very involved in solidarity building in various parts of the world, including in Latin America. They sent a delegation to Bolivia to oversee the elections. In fact, Jeremy Corbyn was part of that delegation. They also sent a delegation to Ecuador. They're connected with folks in Brazil, and of course, some very exciting developments there with the charges being lifted against Lula, the former very progressive president, right? So anyway, so a lot of exciting things, but it's still new. it's still, there's still so much opportunity around it. And I was asked to be one of the council members from Canada. And one of the things I certainly offered from our end, it was to help build the organization and build this network that's all about building international solidarity and supporting our movements here at home and around the world in pursuit of fundamental change, right? So we have this event. It's the first ever Canadian-based event for Progressive International, with Jeremy Corbyn, a lifelong champion for justice in all its forms. And we're asking folks to submit their questions. We're keen to have other activists from across the country participate. And really the focus of the conversation is building international solidarity and the politics of the future, including coming out of the COVID crisis, where we've seen how the status quo has proven not just deadly, or dangerous, but deadly for so many people. So I really want to encourage folks to sign up. We've seen tremendous response so far. We are raising money for the organization as well. We're asking people to pay as you can. So we've seen a lot of people put some money towards this new and growing organization. And I'm very thankful and very excited for not just this event, but what we can do after that as well.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about COVID and how the status quo has proven deadly throughout the COVID crisis. And I think one of the alarming things that we've seen as well is we've seen how the status quo, even when it proves itself to be inadequate in confronting a lot of these crises, can also kind of entrench itself even further. We've seen like this huge upward transfer of wealth, and billionaires are doing better than ever. There doesn't seem to be really like a popular movement to like halt that in any way or reverse that in any way. So do you see the role as Progressive International being part of the solution to kind of call attention to these things and start trying to claw back some of the gains that the elites have been making over this last year and over the last several decades?
Yeah, absolutely. No, Progressive International is very clear on the need for bold redistribution of wealth, wealth tax in favor of corporations paying their fair share, and the Make Amazon campaign was part of that. Also very clear on the need to to call out the billionaires who are benefiting from working people, on the backs of working people, on the backs of people's in the margins, exploiting the environment, and also shining a very bright and unflattering light on the way in which the rich have become much richer during this pandemic. And I know Progressive International has been talking about that and certainly sharing ways that people can fight back, whether it's the Make Amazon Pay campaign, whether it's the support for tenants organizing, whether it's support for bold visions, again, around redistribution, including the Green New Deal, right? And investing in a bold vision to achieve yes, economic justice, but also environmental justice, right? And so Progressive International is really a very I would say dynamic network where people from around the world are sharing the struggles in their own countries, and what we're seeing is common struggles, right? The rise of economic inequality, the rise of the far right, and the ongoing threat and growing threat of the climate emergency. And it's really powerful to see people say, this is how we're fighting back. And to have the opportunity to learn from each other and gain strength and build that solidarity and a global movement for change is something that I think is very exciting and very much needed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One thing that occurred to me, because we were looking back earlier in the stream, we were looking at the launch video for Progressive International and talking about the sort of international progressive movement in 2018 when it launched. We were looking at the sort of the launch video and interviews with Yanis Varoufakis surrounding the launch of Progressive International. And I think there's been somewhat of a change, because in 2018 when it launched, it was coming right off the following the Sanders campaign, which generated so much excitement in the U.S. It was coming right after the Jeremy Corbyn's 2017 campaign where he came very, very close to taking over the government in the United Kingdom and really outperformed all these expectations. And there was really a sense that the progressive movement, even though it was coming off these campaigns that didn't work necessarily, but it felt like there was a sense of it was ascendant, the progressive movement. And I think looking at things now, it's 2021, and I feel like there's a number of people that have followed these campaigns over the last couple of years that are feeling probably pretty disillusioned right now. Understandably, I think, following the second Jeremy Corbyn campaign, which led to, of course, Boris Johnson. We all saw what happened in the U.S. Over the course of the Democratic primary and the presidential election. So I feel like there's a number of people that were following these campaigns that are feeling a little bit disillusioned and not sure what the way forward is for the international progressive movement. So how would you recommend that we take the disappointment that we're all feeling from the last 10, 11 months or so and translate that into something positive rather than just kind of retreating into factionalism and despair?
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, I hear you, Rob. I mean, first of all, and not to sound too corny, but that's why we're all so excited to be doing this event, right? Because we do need, we need to have these discussions. How do we go forward? How do we go forward coming out of this crisis? How do we go forward? Given these exciting movements that we wish would have been elevated, in both in the UK and the US to a greater extent. So we're going to get into some of these things, and I'd also love to hear what Corbyn has to say on very much a similar topic. So cliffhanger. Tune into the event and listen to what he has to say. But look, what I would say though is that those movements, even though Corbyn did not become Prime Minister of the UK and Sanders didn't become president, those movements changed the course of history, and they are still active in so many ways. I mean, let's look at the U.S. So many people have been elected at various levels of government that were involved in the Sanders campaign, that were involved in the movement that Bernie Sanders built, right? We know that the squad's been expanded. We know that people in state legislatures and local government, have been elected. We know in party structures, right? I mean, of course, a number of us saw that in the news. The pro-Bernie slate won, for all the spots in the Nevada Democratic Party, right?
Yeah.
And the establishment isn't has not dealt with that too well, right? So those movements, once you get them started, they're not going anywhere. And if anything, elements might be dormant, but for periods of time, but those that energy and that hope and those ideas, are not only not going away, but they're becoming more and more relevant as the things that Sanders and Corbyn fought against, right? Inequality increases. The far right, is becoming emboldened, and the climate emergency is becoming more and more serious. And I see even in the last week, here in Canada, the way in which so many progressives have rallied around this event really speaks to that desire, right, to have discussions around how we can organize, how we can build that solidarity, and how we can take on these challenges here within our own country, right? I mean, on all of these fronts: inequality, the rise of the far right, and for climate justice, right? So I sense that energy. We see it in the kind of activism from so many young people, from Indigenous activists, from frontline labor activists, from racial justice activists, and it's not only not going away, it's becoming more and more, I would say, present and more urgent in a way what they're calling for, and therefore so is our responsibility as progressives to connect and find ways to build solidarity and support visions for fundamental change.
Yeah. Okay. So I did want to focus a little bit on Canada as well, and you said this is the first Canadian oriented event for Progressive International. You're someone, you ran for leadership of the NDP under the idea that you could kind of create a similar kind of excitement as Bernie Sanders and as Jeremy Corbyn did. And that's been one thing that's been kind of a little bit disappointing and perplexing about Canada over the last 5 years or so, is that it hasn't quite, that kind of a big movement hasn't really materialized here to the same extent as it did in Canada and the UK and these other places. Do you have any insight why you think that is? Because I know it's not a lack of, there are certainly many people, especially young people in Canada, that are very progressive and are very passionate about all this stuff, but it hasn't really coalesced into a big transformative movement to the same extent that it has in these other countries. So, like, do you have any idea why that might be?
Well, I think there must be a PhD thesis somewhere in there. And, and I'd certainly love to hear from folks that may have looked at that very closely. I mean, I think there are a number of factors, and, I'd be happy to do a whole Twitch stream on just that,
sure,
and hear
from
folks what they think, right? But I mean, a couple things do come to mind, right? And one is, we do have a slightly different, we have a very different political system, I would say, than the US.
Sure, yeah.
Right. First past the post, where we know that also, takes away voice and capacity from more progressive parties, right? And for the NDP is an example, right? So a lot of people agree with what we have to say, and their votes don't.
Sure, I think we saw a lot about that in the last federal election campaign, when I think the NDP, I thought, ran quite a solid campaign. We're focusing these kind of economic justice issues, and seemed to speak to a lot of people. But when it came down to it, a lot of, I think, folks were pulled into that kind of two-party thing, and that perpetual scare tactic that we always have to hear about you have to support the Liberal Party in order to prevent the Conservatives from getting in to power. I feel like that affected a lot of people that maybe would have still been interested in the NDP's message in that campaign. Yeah,
and I mean, both strategic voting and just the way the first past the post system is set up, right? And it disempowers people, really. I mean, and we've all fought for electoral reform, and of course the Liberals killed it despite their promises, right? The Conservatives and then the Liberals, right? And there's an element there that I think we cannot deny. The other piece I would say is we also have, for all intents and purposes, a three-party system, right? And Canada outside of Quebec, where you have the Liberals that often talk the progressive talk and never deliver, right? And so, we hear a lot of the performative sort of, they talk about their most important relationship being that with Indigenous people. Trudeau talked about being a feminist prime minister. They talk about lifting the middle class, right? And so, that kind of rhetoric is really, it's disorienting, and I would say, I mean, if you look at the 2015 election, a lot of young people voted for the Liberals because they were using progressive sounding messages,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
And of course we went on to see them break all of their key promises and continue the injustice that Indigenous peoples are facing, continue to support a system where more and more people are falling behind, including women, right? So especially during this crisis. So we don't have that reality that we've seen in the US, of course, with Donald Trump or I guess in the UK, I mean, the absolute sort of, the long-term impact of the Blairite legacy that led to the rise of the right, and really a moment where the left and progressives, were said that they'd had enough, right? I think in Canada we're starting to see. Or we're seeing more and more people say just that we've had enough in terms of, Canadians have had enough, and particularly coming out of this crisis of the status quo. So the question is, how can we harness that feeling and build that solidarity with folks that are putting forward a vision for change in our communities and across our country. And that's, I think, something that we can learn from in talking with people like Corbyn and Sanders and others, how have they made that happen in their own countries, right? And I would say what I really take away from the work that they've done is a fundamental respect for grassroots activists, including within our own parties and our own movements, and but also for social movements and people with whom we share so many values in common, and around the pursuit of social justice and economic justice and racial justice and environmental justice. So how can we work together and bypass the noise of the liberals and of course the conservatives to really affect change politically. So that's I guess for a longer discussion and also for March 20th.
So I'm interested in hearing when you're able to kind of speak specifically to this with Jeremy Corbyn, because I'm sure he's going to have some interesting insights on this. I wanted to talk a little bit about Corbyn, obviously because it's the event you're doing with him, and he's a very popular and important figure on the sort of international left. If you look at the Labour Party, the manifesto in 2017 and 2019, it was a very inspiring and ambitious platform. And I think you saw, especially in 2017, you saw how the power of having this very unapologetically bold platform, and how that can kind of cut through a lot of the noise. And still speak to people, even if you're dealing with a lot of kind of roadblocks to it enacting that. And came, of course, incredibly close, as I mentioned, forming the government in the UK. At the same time, I think it's inescapable to mention that he was also subjected to a really relentless 5-year smear campaign from the British press and sometimes from within his own party. And I think it was perplexing for a lot of people watching that play out, both in the UK and elsewhere. This is a guy that's devoted his entire career to campaigning against racism and campaigning against imperialism and apartheid, who was campaigning actually against apartheid at a time when the UK government and our own government here in Canada still basically supported the apartheid government in South Africa. And then when you had this most recent election in 2019, a lot of the stories you heard from Labour activists and door knockers who were trying to campaign for the Labour Party during this election were hearing all kinds of stuff on the doorstep about how he supports terrorism and he supports anti-Semitism and he's this terrible, violent, scary person. And I think it was really just disturbing because I think it's so at odds with what, if you've looked into Corbyn's career, it's so at odds with what his actual personality is, with what his values are. And I think it was a little bit disturbing and a little bit alarming, frankly, you saw some of this controversy pop up here when you announced this event with Corbyn. And what is your impression of Corbyn, and how does that contrast with the that has been created about him in the British press? And have you noticed that as well?
Well, absolutely. We know that. I mean, you know, not to bring in the monarchy, but this week, right? I mean, the big news was the Meghan and Harry interview, and a key sort of takeaway from that was how relentless and right wing and unforgiving the British press is, and you know, very different circumstances, but a very similar aggressive takedown of Jeremy Corbyn. And I mean, obviously, let's not kid ourselves. For Jeremy Corbyn, it was because he was challenging the political and economic establishment in in the cradle of imperialism, right?
Yeah.
So you know, I mean, he was shaking the foundation of British power, right? He and the movement that he helped create, right? And so, you know, I really appreciated that in the last week, so many Canadians have have spoken out against the mainstream media and others who've similarly shared those smears and lies, and said, you know, first of all, that's unacceptable, and second of all, let's be real on why Jeremy Corbyn was attacked. Right.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, you know, the man just launched his own initiative, right, with others as well in the UK, called Peace and Justice. I mean, that has been the story of his life, a commitment to peace and justice, right? A commitment to the working class, a commitment to fight back against fascism and racism and anti-Semitism and discrimination in all its forms, right? And he's got decades to prove that. And it's so, I would say, not just disappointing, but frankly disturbing to see people share those smears. And I would argue, you know, people that identify as progressive, you know, and it's not to say that people can't disagree with things that he stood for, but the right wing used those smears to demonize, to minimize, to silence, and ultimately, you know, to do what they wanted most, which was to prevent him from taking power. You know, very, very concerning, of course, you know, what's come to light about the way in which his own party, you know, tried to sabotage his work and his campaign team's work during the election. And of course, we've seen the treatment since then as well. You know, so it's I think it's really, really important to be very aware of that recent history, be very aware of the intentions, and really focus on the way in which, you know, that's not just a British phenomenon to demonize left-wing voices. You know, we see it here in our own country, to demonize voices that are challenging the status quo, and to distract from you know, from the actual message and goals of these movements, right, which is fundamental change, right? You know, so I would say that you know, I really am heartened by the many Canadians who have much respect for the work that Jeremy Corbyn has done. I mean, he's also a council member for Progressive International. You know, he believes in building international solidarity, and that's what this event is about. I mean, you know, how do we build that solidarity? And you know, I'm really looking forward to hearing what somebody who's gone through the trenches and found incredible ways to build solidarity along with many others. You know, what can you share with us?
Yeah, I'm very interested in hearing about that as well. And I think you touched on it there. That was the thing that I found really disturbing about that. The fact that, because you kind of expect right-wing media to behave a certain way and to demonize people that are advocating for left-wing ideas, you just accept that that's something that's going to happen. But what we saw in the UK, and we saw this in the US as well, frankly, which is that you had a lot of sort of centrists and liberals that were kind of chiming in and encouraging that kind of thing. And you've seen this tendency from centrist liberals in the UK, in the US, to enable the right wing and enable the far right, because the right wing doesn't really threaten the economic status quo in the same way that left wing politicians do. And there's a lot of troubling historical parallels to that, right? Going back to the foundations of fascist movements in the you know, the 20s and 30s. So I think that's the alarming thing, and I think that's why it's important that you're doing this event, because it's certainly, we've talked about how there hasn't really been a similar, unfortunately, there hasn't really been kind of a similar progressive movement here in Canada. But I think anyone that's contemplating getting involved in such a movement is going to have to be aware that exact kind of stuff is going to happen here as well. And that's why I'm interested to hear Corbyn's take on this, because anyone that's involved in this kind of political movement is going to have to not only be aware it's going to happen, but it's going to have tools as well to kind of overcome it and push through it, right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I and it's come up in these discussions sort of over the last 10 days is really this feeling that a lot of people on the left are, you know, slogging it out in grassroots activism. You know, that there's a potential to feel alone or isolated, right? And you know, and I would say that's why it's so important for us to find ways to build solidarity and support one another, support movements that are already afoot, support the activism that's already ongoing, right? And that's really, you know, what Progressive International is about. That's what the event is about. But more importantly, that's what Progressive International is about. It's a recognition that the right, that those in power, and frankly, that's what neoliberalism is all about, right? To break us down, right? To break us apart. We're all individuals, to really build this sense of hopelessness. And so our ability to fight back is very much rooted in being part of a collective, in building a collective, and fundamental in that is building solidarity.
Great. Well, I'm really looking forward to the event. I know you have other stuff to do and you got to get going soon. I'll post a link to the event if anyone wants to attend this talk you're doing with Jeremy Corbyn. Once again, it's called Building Solidarity, a conversation with Jeremy Corbyn and Niki Ashton. That is next Saturday, March 20th, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern. Do you have anything on final thoughts you want to leave us with? Final elevator pitch for this event, or anything you want to get out there?
Well, I just want to thank you, Rob, for creating this space and engaging so many. It's been a real thrill to speak with you and had the chance to speak with other progressive podcasters and voices over the last number of days. It's spaces like these that give me hope, and I think we have an exciting opportunity in just a few days to connect and gain hope and guidance, right, from somebody that many of us are inspired by. But the sky is the limit. I encourage folks to not just tune in, but also to sign up for Progressive International, and let's keep pushing forward on that vision that I know so many of us share for a better world, a world in which social, environmental, and economic justice aren't just slogans but become a reality. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much for joining us, Niki. It was great to talk to you. Everyone, say goodbye in the chat. It was a pleasure to have you. And we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yes, for sure. An actual Twitch. Actual interview. Thanks so much, Rob.
We can game next time. That would be exciting, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that would be great. Who knows? Maybe my kids will be old enough to join us. Just jokes. That'll probably be another whole thing. But,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Take care,
Niki.
Rob. Take
Thanks
care,
again.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Niki Ashton. All right, that's the end of the video, everyone. Thank you for watching it. If you haven't already, hit the thumbs up, hit the bell, leave a comment or whatever, or don't, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay? All right. Bye.